Hey everyone, welcome back. Before I explored the card making and papercraft niche of hobbies, I dipped a little bit in watercolor. During this time, I taught myself about chiaroscuro, portrait drawing, and the properties of watercolor from various talented artists here on YouTube. Now, I'm sure you can tell by the images of the project that this isn't a card I've made before on my channel. When I first saw the stamp set that I'll show in a bit, my initial thought was to make a botanical illustration inspired card. The history of botanical illustration is pretty fascinating. The emergence of categorizing plants and the need to illustrate them happened simultaneously, and the profession of botanical illustrators were important in identifying the world around them. Botanical illustrators had to record and describe a multitude of species in incredible detail for science, and so of course, this is totally my aesthetic. To me, botanical illustration inspired art contains two elements: hyper-realistic detail and fragmented composition. So in other words, these pomegranates should look like a photograph and be arranged in a way so that all life cycle stages are shown in one panel or plate. Here is the Altenew Happy Pomegranates stamp and die set. This 6x8 stamp set contains 7 outline images and 5 separate sentiment stamps. These pomegranates are perfect for autumn, but I think they would make beautiful summer cards as well. I'll tell you this side note about pomegranates. I had a pomegranate for the first time last year, and I didn't realize they were so much work to eat. So of course this card is going to be a lot of work to make. Anyway, I already arranged the stamps in my Mini Misty and stamped them with antique linen distress ink. This ink is water reactive, so it'll blend into the watercolor I'm using today, giving the illusion of no outline coloring. This arrangement is deliberate, and this is how the pomegranates will appear on my card front. There are many botanical illustrations available to look at online for inspiration if you need help arranging your stamps. My favorite watercolor paper is this Arches cold press in 140 pound. I've tried other student grade papers on other card projects, but the quality of Arches is way beyond the other paper pulp based papers. The cotton fibers in the Arches paper give a professional edge to your projects, so it's the only watercolor paper I have. This panel I have in the Misty is about 5x6. I don't like to pre-cut my panels to A2 4¼ by 5½ because of the warping after watercolor may expand the panel and consequently it will not fit on my card front. Or if I want to tape down the panel to a work surface, I may be left with an unpainted margin. So here I'm showing the final plate again, stamped in distress ink, and now begins the fun part of watercoloring. I don't own the Altenew pan colors, and I've had these watercolors and watercolor tubes for a few years. So here I'm showing you my small collection of Koi and Windsor & Newton watercolors. I've got them in little half pans in a pan case. I have room for many more, but for now I'm happy with the colors I have in my personal set. I'll be using a silver black velvet number 8 round brush to do all of my coloring today. Soon I'll be speeding up this portion of coloring, but before I do that, I just wanted to share a few tips I have for watercolor. First, you have to practice. Water is unpredictable, and you can take that either positively or negatively. I make the choice of making this a positive aspect of watercolor, but it's just something to be aware of. Watercolor is beautifully transparent, so it's easy to apply thin washes and consequently glaze to get dimension on your painting. Watercolor pigments do not behave the same for all colors. With that being said, it's important to swatch all your colors and know how they lift, the spread of the pigment, light fastness, graininess, opacity. Knowing your colors beforehand makes coloring effortless. I think one of the first rules I knew about watercolor is to work from lightest to darkest. This enables a pigment to show at its best vibrance on your painting and will make your colors appear less muddy. And I think that's all I have for now. I'm going to put on some music and I'll talk to you at the end of the painting process. This panel took nearly 2 hours to complete, if that gives you any idea of how long it may take you to take on your watercolor project. I enjoy it though, it's sort of meditative. But anyway, before I put my watercolors away completely, I added some numbers with a number 1 script brush and a light gray watercolor, just to enforce the botanical illustration feel of this card. Of course, I had to put the scientific name for pomegranates on the card, Punica granatum. I use this A2 transparency to make sure when I trim down the panel that the elements are going to be centered on the card front. I trimmed this down to be slightly smaller than a card front and foam mounted it to my note card base. I find that this helps a little bit with the warping, but it doesn't make it completely go away. That's the beauty of a handmade card, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's driving me crazy that it isn't flat, but I'm just too obsessive for that. So here are the notorious slow-mo pans of the final card. I hope this inspires you to break out your watercolors for your next project. I know many of you are lucky to have gardens of your own to reference flowers, fruits, vegetables for your own botanical illustration inspired cards. Just don't forget to enjoy the process of coloring and take your time to add in those details. Hey, thank you so much for watching my video and for all the lovely comments you leave over on Instagram, my blog, and here on YouTube. Thanks to Team Altenew for the lovely stamp set for this release, and as always, I'll talk to you all very soon. Have the best day.